place to call. The phone boy took the message and he wrote it on the wall.
The Animals were a British rock band. They were formed in Newcastle in the north of England in 1962, which is just a few miles away from where I'm recording this. And they were, at that point, Eric Burdon, Alan Price, Chas Chandler, Hilton Valentine and John Steele. Their style was R&B / blues with a raw edge, gritty vocals, distorted guitar. They were kind of part of the start of the idea of rock as a harder type of music, and they were part of the British invasion to America as time went on. As they gained success, they moved down to London in 1964. A couple of years later, they started to fall apart. So in 1966, they kind of they didn't kind of abruptly stop, but they became a different band. Really, with the only remaining guy being Eric Burdon, and he renamed them to Eric Burdon and the Animals, and they moved to California and went psychedelic. They lasted there until 1969, and over this period, from 1962 to 1969, they produced 10 albums. Since then, there's been several reunions, resurgences, and rearrangements, and there's been 2 more albums that have come out since then. Hi, my name's Dan, and this is a review of The Animals by The Animals, which was the first album by The Animals, and it's my first time listening to it. However, I need to do a little bit of housekeeping first. If you're new to my channel, you might not know that I'm working my way through a list at a website called Acclaimed Music, and they have created a ranked list of the 3,000 greatest albums of all time, according to this algorithm of putting together scores from critic lists. And so I am following this list, but occasionally I have issues in interpretation that I need to deal with of what album do I need to review. And in this case, the problem is that there are 2 albums released by The Animals called The Animals in the same year, which was 1964. One of them was released in the UK, one was released in the US. So which one should I review? So in this case, I went back to the Acclaimed Music site, and the big hint was the cover picture that they used there was the picture from the UK album. So that is the one that I'm going to review. So the American one has The Rising Sun on it. This one doesn't. So I'm going to describe this as being R&B and rock and roll, and R&B standing for rhythm and blues. And so I've just reviewed a modern alternative R&B album, and they could not be more different. R&B back in the 60s meant something very different to what it means now. And I think that the biggest kind of common reference that people will have is the Blues Brothers film and band, is in that they were rhythm and blues of the old kind, what I think of as generally as the good kind. Okay, there's 3 John Lee Hooker tracks here. There's 2 Fats Domino tracks. There's 2 Chuck Berry tracks. There's a few other R&B tracks. There's an adapted traditional gospel song. And then there's a semi-original track, which is the first track on the album, called The Story of Bo Diddley. Let's talk about that briefly, because I really enjoyed it. It was the best track on the album. It's mostly spoken stuff, and it's about Bo Diddley, who was an R&B guitarist and singer, and it name-checks several other artists, and it uses snatches of their songs, and has a whole story about Bo Diddley coming to a club in Newcastle in the north of England and them encountering him. But musically, it's based on a famous groove by Bo Diddley, which is the dum 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 sound, which then became the hand jive, which they refer to, and various other things. Going back to the album as a whole, it sounds very 60s, which is understandably. It's got guitar, organ being rock organ, bass and drums and singing. Eric Burdon, I believe, is the guy singing here. He's got a strong, confident, slightly raspy voice. It works well for this music. Slightly reverbed. So the whole thing, in some ways, sounds a bit weird in retrospect, looking back. It's slightly odd because it's a kind of anglicised rock pop version of R&B. And the reason why that sounds odd to us, even though uh, Eric Burden does put on kind of American airs when he's singing and speaking, the reason why it sounds odd to me anyway now is because we have access to the originals that this was taken from, and the fundamental style of R&B and rock and roll very familiar now. And when I say rock and roll, I'm talking about Chuck Berry here, not Elvis Presley. Um, um, so very familiar. We've got access to this stuff that I listened to. In 1964 in England, this would have been radical. It would have been very much outside most people's understanding or knowledge. Not everybody, there were always enthusiasts. So historically, there was this kind of thing where the British blues bands, there's the blues explosion. So bands like the Animals and the Stones and the Yardbirds brought a whole area of American music to the UK public that they weren't aware of before. Um, and of course, they put their own spin on it, and that's what it's got, is its own spin. So it has that. It's a fairly strong album, and I did enjoy it. It's got a slightly garagey feel of kind of less produced certainly than some stuff around then, which would have given it a kind of, a rawness and appeal to maybe the younger end of the market. I don't know. Maybe I'm doing down the older end of the market at that point in time. So I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it. And I wonder if that not loving it is as a result of this slight weirdness that I felt with it not being um, proper American R&B. It is, though, proper English R&B, I guess you could say. So that's what I think of this album. As always, I'd love to know what you think. And so you can do that by leaving me a comment. Or you can not do that. I mean, it's entirely your choice. It's just, I would quite like it if you did. So please will you. That's it from me for now.
Now let's hear the story of Bo Diddley, the rock and roll scene in general.